Hey, I'm Will LaVeist. He's Eric ClaVille, and you're tuned into LaVeist and ClaVille, where we give it to you straight the way it is from a black male's perspective. Now, today's show, little to nothing. Why do blue-collar voters, blue-collar white voters in particular, tend to vote against their interests for Republican candidates? Now, Eric, this is, we've talked a lot about this, over the years offline. What is going on when you got a candidate, for example, like a Mitt Romney, right, going back further, and then a Donald Trump, all of these guys that come out of
Joe Mitch?
Guys that come out of the, elite classes, but are somehow able to get this blue-collar representation, even though their policies don't even reflect the best interests of these lower middle or lower working class, individuals. We got some of the bluest counties in America, some of the bluest and whitest and poorest counties in America have representation by these kind of political leaders. I mean, what is it, what is it that is going on here?
Well, Will, again, it's a head scratcher. I mentioned, a lot of these red counties.
I said blue. I'm sorry. I meant red counties, right? See, I'm spoken like a true independent. To me, it's blue, it's all red. They all the same, right?
Especially when you look at the policies. One thing that I'm going to digress for a minute because you bring that up. It's all the same. Because the one thing that this last administration championed was minimum wage increase. We're going to do it for you. Man, look, they didn't even get past the inauguration yet before they said it was a no-go. And the people are saying, what are you talking about? But anyway, and that's how you erode trust in the system. But I'm going to get back to that in a moment. But let's take a look at these red counties. Now, I mentioned Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin is not from the elite, but he represents West Virginia, right? West Virginia is a perfect example of individuals it's a red state, red county, extremely red. It is a state of less than 2 million people. It's a state of extreme poverty. Now, when I say extreme poverty, there are some people in the United States that have not seen this type of poverty exist. West Virginia, the Delta in Mississippi, areas in Louisiana, and also Arkansas. All right, these states have some of the poorest counties and parishes when you're looking at Louisiana in the entire
some of the largest white populations in the states and poorest states, and yet they're the reddest states against policies that would help them to be able to uplift, like Medicare type policies or income policies. But go ahead.
Right. So they end up voting for a party, Republican Party, whose domestic policies are geared toward the top 3% as opposed to the bottom 3%. Right. So when we talk about extreme poverty, or even the working man, but we're talking about extreme poverty now. So they would rather vote for a Republican that, quote unquote, talks about the status of America, right? Talks about this moral majority. And really a lot of these are racist tropes, right? That were created back in the 70s, 80s when the Republican Party needed a new group of individuals to court to increase their status. They courted the church, what's called the white church, the Southern Baptist movement, and they call themselves the moral majority. So and now we call them the conservative Christian right? So it sounds good, you're Christian, you're conservative as opposed to liberal. These guys all these liberals want to do is just legalize all dope and drugs and so forth and so on. So you're a conservative, You believe in traditional families. You believe in a mother and father in the family. You believe in eating dinner at the table together, reading scripture at night and praying with the kids, which is all great things. And then not only you're Christian, you're conservative, but you're also right. You're right of the issues, which mentally, right? Psychologically, you think if I'm right of the issue, then I am correct.
But it's not that kind of right.
So, right, but that's not what you think about, right? What you talk about, and just as we just use it, it's an affirmation of you being correct. It's an affirmation of you not being wrong. It's an affirmation that you are the leader or the leading person in this argument, right? So now what happens is that you get this mentality that, okay, if I vote for these policies, it's going to destroy the America that I know. It's going to destroy the America.
The one that we want to go back to, the one that we want to, make great again. The one that never even quite worked for you. Because it didn't work for your father, it didn't work for your grandmother. It never quite worked for you. But somehow that's the America that you want to go back to.
Yeah. And Will, keep in mind, there's nothing new under the sun. I say what was, is, and what is shall be. Make America great again wasn't something that dropped out of the sky. That's what Ronald Reagan ran.
Exactly.
So they just simply cast the line and pulled back 40 years ago what worked and did it again. And guess what? It worked again. And it's still working, right? People talk about, Trump losing the election. He didn't lose by a landslide. It took a lot of work to get a lot of new voters registered. It took a lot of work to get a lot of people to the polls. It took a lot of work to pass policies to give access to the polls. It took a lot of work. It did not take a lot of work for less than 5 million people that voted for Trump to go out and vote, right? So if you really want to be honest about this, the majority of America still believes in those policies of Ronald Reagan, still believes in those policies of the propaganda of Trump, which still believes that America was better, 50 years ago than opposed to that.
Now, a good example of why what you're saying is correct, because you can just go back to when Romney ran. That's why I mentioned him earlier. So you got in 2000, I'm looking this up, and I'm looking at this county, Owsley County, Kentucky. Okay, 97% white. Median income is $19,000. Okay,
dollars.
19,000 per year. Now the median income, America's median income is 52,000. This county is about 19,000. Right, 52% back when Romney was running back in 2011. 52% of the people there receive food stamps. 52%, and they voted handily for Mitt Romney, the one who was talking about how these lower class individuals and so forth is. The one who was berating and degrading, who was caught on tape degrading it.
On tape and play.
Right. They vote handily for him and others whose policies cut those food stamps, cut those very lifeline government subsidies, safety net type programs that's actually helping to keep things afloat for them. And so we continue to see, but yet when you look at what you see projected on television and in media about who is America's poor, right? It continues to be Black people, brown people, folks in inner city areas. Again, you mentioned Reagan, the whole thing about welfare moms, or you can go to after Reagan and Daddy Bush, and it was Willie Lynch. These criminals who are looking to just get over on the system and steal.
Lock them up, throw away the key, right?
Yeah, so now we've got it's the immigrants who are coming in and invading. So we got to build the wall. We've got to do this. And then you vote these people into office, and they're cutting the very programs that are enabling you to sustain
Right.
your children, your families. How do you?
Absolutely. And then not only that, Will, they spin the message and say that these people who are coming in illegal are taking your jobs, when in actuality, corporate America and the elites, which were benefited in a part by the Clinton Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA and GATT, but primarily pushed, by continual Republican policies that value corporations and the wealthy more so. Those individuals took more jobs from white Americans than anything. So, I mean, again, it's that message. It's that message. It's that spin, because it's a terrible thing, man, when you create an image and that is not true, and you create truth around it, fallacies around it to make it true. It's hard to get that out your mind, right? Because now you got people that still believe in quote unquote black welfare mothers.
Right.
that is the reason why we're in debt. When in actuality, it's tax cut upon tax cut for the top 3%. It's incentives, corporate welfare up on for corporations every single year. The biggest tax cut came during the Trump administration. Today, where again, before the pandemic, before the stimulus, before the CARES Act 1 and 2, after the tax cut, after the tax cut, guess what? Guess what, man? We were borrowing. Guess how much we were borrowing per month after the Trump tax cut?
How much?
In order to sustain us? $100 billion a month.
And who were we borrowing it from?
We were selling bonds. And what happened was, after the stock market collapsed under Bush, due to the mortgage implosion, and the stimulus bill was signed to get America back, the buyout, and it was put up on Obama's shoulders and Joe Biden in order to administer that buyout, okay, and that plan after the banks got their money and the corporations, right? So what happened was, from there, we started buying. The Federal Reserve was buying our bonds, because our bonds were not as, how can I say, trustworthy across the world after the mortgage collapse, right? And so what ended up happening, man, we ended up now coming back, and we had decreased, the Federal Reserve had decreased buying our bonds. After that tax cut, the Federal Reserve increased buying our bonds. And now the individuals that buy our bonds the most is the Federal Reserve. So basically, we got the National Bank, which is really the World Bank for us, the Federal Reserve for the United States, buying bonds from the United States, saying, hey, we need $100 billion. Okay, I trust you. Now you can print $100 billion worth of money. So it's basically taking $100 out of your pocket, your right pocket, Will, and put it in your left pocket. That's exactly
and then when you get into these discussions about bonds and about, funds, and again, the typical person in Owsley County or in Kentucky or in Virginia or in Arkansas, they're not tuned in to the details of these conversations and not seeing how it trickles down, right, into their lives. But when you see your livelihood disappearing, right, and a lot of these areas, jobs were tied to, to the agrarian society, they're tied to the farms, or they're tied to the manufacturers, like you said, to the chicken plant or to the coal mines. You see these things disappearing. But a lot of why they're disappearing is not because there's some other group coming from south of the border, or these, other African Americans, these, those black folks that are looking to rob me and take something from me. It's coming because of the very policies that were made by folks who you voted in office. They're not beholden to you as constituents looking at what is best for their particular counties. They're looking at, okay, who is contributing to my campaign And what are these interests that are helping me to remain in office? And then they turn around and
You hit the nail
so
on
the
the
whole
head.
hustle,
You hit the
so
nail
the
on the head.
whole scheming again,
You didn't call it a hustle, did you?
yeah, I called it a hustle because, these are the things that I saw, as a reporter, working as a columnist, working as a reporter in Virginia. And you see this going on over and over and over again. And you're trying to inform the public of what is going on and what does this policy really mean that you're hearing that sounds abstract, when it's being talked about in a soundbite on TV or in a debate. But you're trying as a journalist to connect those dots for people to make them understand, okay, this is how that policy will affect you directly in your home, in your household. But then you're up against the messaging that comes out from these different political campaigns, different PACs, different groups, like you said, that are doing what you mentioned earlier, spinning the narrative in a way that puts the blame on someone else. And again, it's the power of being persuasive, the power of slick speaking. I mean, we've seen it to the hilt with, the previous president, who still to this day, if you analyze the policies and the impact and lack of impact that it actually had on the people who are storming the Capitol, right? In terms of turning their lives around, yet and still they're still storming the Capitol under some pretense that this is the Messiah who's going to make my life better. But are you looking at what the policy actually means? So
no, Will, they're not looking at the policy again. They're looking at the images that were branded in their minds, their brains, their psyche 50 years ago, and then perpetuate through public policy that continue to disadvantage not just those groups that they created those fallacies for and those tropes, but also them, right? Oh, and then, you can't really, and then they created this narrative, this false narrative that affirmative action was this one black guy coming into this company of 10,000 people is the one that took your
affirmative action, which by the way was a Republican, that was affirmative action was introduced under Nixon. It was a Republican reaction and understanding that here is a way of, here is one tool in the box to remedy, some several generations of injustice. Here's a tool, and it's a Republican tool. I mean, it had bipartisan support, but that was initiated by the Nixon administration.
Absolutely. And it was because they recognized, hey, we purposefully withheld upward mobility and advancement in our companies, even from the government, even from buying a house.
Absolutely.
If you a home that was backed by FHA, by the government, in the clause, it said you cannot sell this house to a black person. You cannot resell this house to a black person. If you do, we will not back this loan, and the loan will become immediately due. Right? So that was purposeful, and they understood that. So affirmative action, which I think should have been labeled corrective action, was the right thing to do. Right. Hands down. But what happened was white women and Asians really benefited more from affirmative action in anything, because the job market and the job occupations for those high-level jobs were mostly white male. It's almost exclusively white male. I mean, it was if one of the shows that I like to watch, Mad Men. That's what society looked like, where women were in service jobs, but then to move up, right? That was almost unheard of. So white women benefited more. If you look at the change in the work environment, white women, then Asian Americans, and then African Americans benefited, right? So, but most of the tropes were based upon these black, quote unquote, unqualified black person. And look, I've done some employment law discrimination cases in my time. And let me tell you, the criteria and the debt is stacked against African Americans trying to advance. Also, Asian Americans, they're stacked against them, and they give these unfair advantages to what we call what Paul Robeson calls the most favored race, with his Rutgers valedictorian speech. Great Renaissance man. I just had to throw Paul Robeson in there. He was also a lawyer with the Columbia, but he was very talented.
Well, and his father went to Lincoln University, and he
did, and his father was a preacher
at Lincoln University of Pennsylvania. So but when
Absolutely.
you mention that, when you talk about that, man, it reminds me of, when I was a reporter, and I went down to the Pettus Bridge, the 50th anniversary, when Clinton actually went down there and commemorated that anniversary of what happened on the Edmund Pettus Bridge with John Lewis and other civil rights giants being attacked. And I remember being in a car with in a cab with a cab driver, and he was telling me about how much the white community down there disliked Clinton, and how people were angry about him coming there to participate in this, and because of his policies had allowed them to move up the have a measure of social mobility, upward mobility. Because you remember during the Clinton years, there was Clinton left office, he had a surplus in office. Clinton years for many, on the scale of comparing certain presidencies compared to Bush, who came after him, Clinton years were good for a lot of people. And he was saying that those folks were so angry at Clinton, and he couldn't understand it, that the fact that their lives had improved under Clinton. But part of why they were angry is because Black people's lives
improved. There you go. That's it.
Clinton.
That's it.
And that's what really gets to the mindset of what is going on here. And the politicians understand that that's what they're playing on. Is still playing on these racist class tropes of,
white supremacy.
We're upholding
white superiority.
We're upholding, your standing in this hierarchical, caste system. We're upholding it. And if we aren't the guardians of it, if we don't control these folks coming across the border, if we don't control, these Blacks rising up and not knowing their place, then there's not going to be an adequate place.
Did you say their place?
There's not going to be an adequate place for you. But the
white man.
But in actuality, again, supporting policies that actually undermine your interests. So it's like you actually prefer to continue to suffer rather than to see policies where the country as a whole becomes more prosperous, is more income in people's hands. If there's more income in everyone's hands, that's more income that can circulate throughout the economy and can lift, everybody's standard of living. So it's just amazing that we continue to come back to this issue of, of race and how race, sets these caste systems, and people want to hold on to their places in the system rather than, seeing a country where everybody can really pursue happiness and everybody can have a piece of the pie and how everybody can benefit from it.
Yeah. But Will, you hit the nail on the head. Knowing their place. These United States of America that is located on native lands, taken, as they say, Code 45 and Smith & Wesson won the West, right? Around manifest destiny, right? It's your God-given right to take this land, and to commit genocide, also to destroy, animals, the buffalo, the wolf, and so forth, and all that, on your way to the West. All of that, including the laws and public policy that created a separate and unequal society, and created in its effect a caste system which said that if you're white, no matter if you are dirt poor, in the words of Justice Taney, in the Dred Scott case, which was the legal bullet that helped to start the Civil War, there are no rights any white man has rich white man, poor white man, northern white man, southern white man, East Coast white man, West Coast white man. There are no rights that any white man,
any
there are
black
no
man
rights
have that
black
that
man,
white man would
black
respect.
man has that any white man is bound to respect. There are no rights that any black man has that any white man is bound to respect. Think about that. Now, that case was a procedural case that was actually lost on procedural grounds, which, if that's the case, all you got to do is just sign it and say, the case is not right, you have no standing, that it's moot, you need to go back to wrong jurisdiction, and you sign it. It's a one paragraph, 2-sentence, really, order. But Justice Sonny decided to add his 2 cents in, and he wrote that decision. What he was saying to America was, see, blacks are they call becoming uppity, right? Or in the Hollywood portrayal of the movie Rosewood, which is very similar to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where the white man's standing saying that, you see that Negro, he got a piano. Right. I don't have a piano. Right. Maybe because you can't play piano. He plays piano, right? It was a time period doing, Joplin, ragtime, so piano was great. But anyway, you hit the nail on the head. It's about that caste system that was created for these United States of America, which we operate in, right? So we see the chipping away and the telling of those lies. And it's one thing, well, you think about it, and I kind of liken this to family, right? When someone gets ready to read a will, right. And when you read the will, you leave belongings to your lineage, right? So your wife, your children, and so forth. Well, sometimes, the person that you thought was your daddy, or your daddy,
watch out now,
that was not, right, is not, right? So, and look, I know you wrote a book, and, you hit this page. I know you addressed this as well, but it's something when you have to come to grips that you've been lied to all your life. That's a hard thing to come to grips with. It's a hard thing to reconcile. And you built your life around.
Yeah, it's cognitive dissonance, man. I mean, it's like, you said, you built your life around it. Your existence is rooted in it. And then you're seeing all this evidence of it being a lie. And that's a lot of what is encouraging and what the uprising that we've seen in the past year with the killing of George Floyd and others, really bringing the Black Lives Matters movement to the forefront, to be able to see a lot of whites, a lot of Latinos, people, Asian people of all different hues, recognizing and saying, wait a minute, this is not who we are, who we should be, who we can be. And that's what's really encouraging, is that you see a lot of people, a lot of white people who are sincerely saying, I'm first part of the human family. And this isn't accept.
This has nothing to do with that.
This is not acceptable. This is not acceptable. And beginning to realize that, yes, when you continue to perpetuate, adopt, uphold, root your existence in this lie, that you are actually undermining your own self. I mean, this over belief of your superiority is not healthy for you either. And so we live in a society where you see so much sickness. You see so many people who are not doing well in mental health issues, and so many people who are not thriving and being all that they can be. A lot of it, again, is rooted in the lies that we continue to perpetuate, even when we know better. So I'm encouraged when I see a lot of whites who are fine and actually confident in themselves, competing on a level playing field, and are out in the streets fighting for a side by side as well. And that has always been a strain of that in this country as well. We have to acknowledge, very much so, there's always been a strain, whites who have put human rights and being part of the human family first over white superiority, and have fought to dismantle it. And it's encouraging.
That's right. And you've helped educate me on a lot of that as well, with the history of the Mennonite Church, also the
Absolutely.
Quakers, the abolitionists, the Bernie Sanders, who actually learned, the Freedom Riders. They all learned how to protest, and what they're doing now. So you're exactly right. At the end of the day, it's you have to have. I think about the children of Israel. And I'm going back to Sunday school and Vacation Bible School. My mother ran Vacation
Right.
Bible School until she passed away.
Amen.
Church, and what I think about the children of Israel, how the God of Israel, Jehovah, gave them all these advantages, right? So I bring out the slavery and so on. They just kept being disobedient. So he said, you know what? Some of y'all got to die because before I bring you over here, some of y'all got to die because you're not going to change. And I think what we're seeing is that we have a generation that must pass before we get past this issue. So I am also encouraged by the interracial makeup of this social justice movement. I am encouraged about the youth who are galvanizing around
This
these
Joshua
issues.
generation.
But
This Joshua generation is up now. Yeah.
actually added soul to the message. That's right. That's right. So with that, those who are standing at the wall, those that are, the Jeremiah has given the warning. Now I think you have those who are pushing and getting over to us to get to that promised land. But it's up to you and I and persons like us to make sure that our issues don't get lost in translation.
What do you think? What do you think that as we wrap up, what our people need to do when it comes to voting your interests, learning from watching a group of people continuing to put folks in office who are actually undermining their interests. They're actually undermining their interests. And you keep putting them in office. I mean, what can Black people do and learn from that?
Absolutely. So real quick, just in the last few moments, another great discussion. Of course, we're going to come back to this. Give us your comments on our social media. But I believe that one thing that we have to do is continue to be informed about policies that are being written. Make sure that our needs, as I mentioned before, are at the forefront. Make sure that the policies are just not there to help those that give the most money, but help those that give the most votes. So again, it goes back to this, for example, the minimum wage issue and the living wage issue and the like. So I think we're heading in the right direction. So like I said, we'll talk about this more. This is it for this episode. Thank you for listening to LaVeist and ClaVille. Follow us on our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Thank all of you for liking us, sharing, follow, continue your comments. Thank you for your support. And for us, that's the way it is. We'll see you next time.